I sat down with three of my favorite astrologers, Malini Iyer, Alix Clayman, and Alexis Cox, talking about 2020. What's next? You'll get a great oversight with eclipses, nodes changing signs, Mars, and Jupiter. So check this out. Hey folks, welcome to this web class, this web video recording of 2020. What's next? It's been quite a year already, and I have three of my favorite Vedic astrologers joining me. We have Dr. Malini Iyer and Alexandra Rose and Alexis Cox, and these are three excellent astrologers. They've also studied with me before. They have YouTube channels, they have websites, they do readings, all kinds of stuff. You've seen them on my channel before, and we're gonna take a little trip through the rest of 2020 and four of the most important shifts rather that we have ahead. And we're going to talk about Mars going through Pisces and Aries for the rest of the year. We're also going to talk about Jupiter changing and entering Capricorn, where he'll also be into next year. And then we're going to talk about the nodes changing signs, moving from Gemini to Taurus. And then we're going to talk about the solar eclipse at the end of the year in December. So we're each going to take one of these subjects and sort of present, and then we'll sort of kick it around and have a conversation. And it should be enjoyable for everyone, hopefully. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Everybody like to say hi. Anyone would just go around real quick and introduce yourself too. Real quick, just tell each, about your work a little bit and what you're going to be talking about. We start with you, Malini.
Hi, I'm Malini. I've been studying with Sam since 2013. I'll be presenting today the transit of Jupiter through Capricorn. I personally have this placement, and through astrology has been a spiritual foundation for me. And this important placement hits home, and I'm excited to present it today.
Great. And Malini, your website is, what is it called again?
I have a website called cosmicartandscience.com.
Cosmicartandscience.com.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, they're all my astrology musings, and I'm a scientist and a researcher by profession. So everything that I write, I blog, and I talk about astrology is also found on my website.
Great. Thank you, Malini. And Alexandra Rose, welcome.
Hi, I go by Alix, but my astrology foundation is called Alexandra Rose Vedic Astrology. And I've been studying with Sam for 3 or 4 years now, and started doing consultations about 3 years ago, and have been a consistent astrologer since then, 2 or 3 readings a week with ongoing clients. And to mirror what Malini said, the astrology really is a spiritual foundation for me, and really helps me to see the bigger picture all the time, and to come back to working with how I can know about myself through the astrology. The planetary placements are a mirror for me of where I can grow and expand. And then the transits as well are a way to tune in with what's going on now, so that we really can reap the most rewards and benefits by tuning in to those frequencies. So I'll be presenting on Mars's transit. Mars is currently in Pisces, and then we'll be going back and forth between Pisces and Aries for the rest of the year. So I'll be sharing about that.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And your website is?
AlexandraRose.com.
AlexandraRose.com. And Alex also does a lot of YouTube videos as well. Thank you, Alex. And Alexis.
Thank you. My name's Alexis Cox. My website is radhahomeyoga.com. And I've been also studying with Sam since 2013. Malini and I were in the same entering class, and we've been working with him for a long time. I found Vedic astrology through sort of the last of the 3 sister sciences that I found. I was a yoga teacher, and I had studied Ayurveda. And in my Ayurvedic class, I had a Vedic astrologer come, and it brought everything together for me. And I realized how much each one of these sciences takes on so much more when they're informed by each other. So it was a great blessing to meet Sam soon after and be able to start studying in depth and really understand how these energies work. And I use them in my yoga classes, in my life, with my friends and relationships. And it really helps me to have empathy for people when I'm dealing with them in challenges as well, just because I can see what we're all dealing with and what maybe they're specifically dealing with if I've looked at their chart. I'm excited to be presenting Rahu moving into Taurus and Ketu moving into Scorpio. Very personal for me as well, as I am a Taurus rising. So I look forward to this conversation and the shift.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's moving from my ascendant into yours. So
I know. I just wrote my report on that. And I'm like feeling sorry for the Geminis, but
yeah. And so I'm Sam, and you all know me from my channel and whatnot. And I have a school, and these are some great students that I've been blessed to teach. Hundreds of students have graduated from my certification courses and whatnot. And so I'm blessed to be able to do that and to teach. And I have a lot of courses at my website. Vedicastrologycenter.net is my main website with my courses. And I'm going to be talking about the eclipse in December, the solar eclipse in Scorpio. And so we'll take that one last. We're going to sort of go in chronological order, a little out of sync. It'll go Alix first, who's going to talk on Mars, and then Malini is going to talk on Jupiter, and then Alix will talk on the shift of the nodes, and then I'll do the eclipses to kind of group it that way. So with that introduction, let's go. And Alix is going to talk about the transit of Mars through Aries and through Pisces and Aries for the rest of the year. Do you want me to bring up the chart, Alix?
Sure.
Okay. So this is 8/28. So what do we have going on right now, Alix? What's happening?
Well, we have Mars. Mars entered into Pisces on June 18th. So we've been in this cycle for a little bit over a month now. And I think that we started to feel it. It was around the time, at least in the United States, when everything started happening with George Floyd and all these things, and all the protests started. Mars was in Aquarius, which is a lot. Aquarius is an air sign, so Mars brings the heat, and really we saw a lot of uprising and social justice issues when Mars was going through Aquarius. And then, now for about a month or so, the Mars entering into Pisces began a transit of really working with the Mars energy of action and discipline and focus, but less on just social justice, but now it's elevated to Pisces, which I see it more as, and I've heard it referred to as like a spiritual warrior, where the focus isn't just on fighting externally, but really utilizing that feminine water and the Jupiter rulership, which is our higher philosophies, our higher principles, our spiritual presence, really using that Mars energy to focus on right action within, and right action based on really unifying with a higher consciousness. And so I think that when Mars was going through Aquarius, that kind of put this into motion. But now with Mars and Pisces, we're really dealing with disciplining ourselves on a higher plane, a spiritual plane, not just what we're doing outside, but what we're doing inside. Because Pisces is really about spirituality and devotion, and again, really connecting to something beyond this world, something of a higher consciousness. And I think that Mars is really powerful in Pisces for that reason, because it can make the battle be something that's not just battling ideas, like an air sign, battling ideas or the government or this or that, but it's really battling kind of the going to battle with kind of our internal dialogue, our internal reactions, and connecting us to something greater, really putting our right action towards how to sow seeds for the future, especially with that Mars and Revati. by really attuning ourselves correctly. I think that's why it's such a spiritualized placement for Mars. For that reason, because it can direct us into something greater, putting our action towards something greater. And I think one of the things I think of with Mars and Pisces is like, we think it's a lot of work to change our actions and to discipline ourselves in an internal basis, but it's actually much more work to stay in the suffering. And so this is where I think we can really utilize this time, as many people are hopefully feeling, to focus on right action and disciplining Mars qualities within ourselves to take actions that are destroying our false belief systems and allowing us to tune to something greater. So it's a powerful time for that. With Mars going through Pisces, I think if Mars is all about action, Mars wants to take an action. And so in Pisces, we can really utilize this time to direct Mars to discipline ourselves into letting go and going with the flow and being guided, like being a conscious participant in the flow of life and being guided in right action, and seeing how that happens. And then I see that you've shifted Mars into Aries.
On the 16th,
Yes.
like August 16th.
Yes. So about a month from now, a little bit less, 3 weeks, Mars will go into Aries. And why that makes right now such an important time is because we can be disciplining ourselves on an internal basis, connecting to something greater, connecting to our spiritual practice, which is always going deeper inside. It's like just when you think you can't go more, you got it figured out, you can go deeper. And then by the time Mars goes into Aries, it's like, all right, let's put that into practice now and see how our actions, our internal dialogue, our internal discipline, and our connection to something greater, that spiritual warrior that we can all get into, how that then plays into our external actions, because that's what Aries is. It's very external. It can be aggressive, it can be impulsive, it can want to, really do what it wants to do, Mars there. But if we've been taking this time to connect ourselves with the flow, then when Mars goes into Aries, we're really able to take an action that's from a place of integrity in our heart and a centered place connected to spirit. So it's very auspicious. I think Mars in both water and fire signs does well. And so it's, again, working with that internal integrity and then seeing how that internal integrity plays out on an external level.
Then he turns retrograde September 10th. We won't get into the retrograde. Maybe we'll talk about the retrograde another time.
Sure.
So he's there from it was August 16th until October 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
So from August 16th to October 3rd, he's in Aries, and then he goes back again.
Yeah. And I think that, not talking too much about the retrograde, but it is important, the fact that he's retrograding right back, because then it's like we get to reflect and see, okay, wait, like, were those actions in integrity? Like what was going on there? And I think paying attention to those exact dates where he goes forward and retrogrades, because there's also the stationary aspect, the stationary direct and the stationary retrograde, where
that's what I mean. It's a lot to unravel the whole thing, but we'll talk about the principle. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And so paying attention to that, because it's really a dance of internal, external discipline. And the idea that Pisces is about escaping into something, and this is something that Sam has taught me and us, is about Pisces wanting to escape from the world. So how do we escape? Do we escape into right action, into something that's true? Or do we escape into apathy and addiction and, these kind of things? So it's really about, what are you going to choose, I think, during this period? How are you going to choose to direct your attention, to direct your actions, to direct your focus? And then seeing through this transit as Mars goes between Pisces and Aries is really the internal and then the external reflection, and then maybe drawing back into the internal and getting yourself in the right discipline, so that you can really make a difference on the external, just because of the amount of internal work and discipline that you've been able to do, and not tuning out, but tuning in. And I think Mars is really good for that.
And then see, he goes back into Pisces again, and then he goes stationary direct. But again, as you see, I'll bump this forward by a week. Then he goes direct in Pisces, and then he goes back into Aries again. Now, this is actually February of next year. Mars is still in either Pisces or Aries. So again, this is a long transit. It started in June this year. So between June and like almost March of next year, Mars is in either Pisces or Aries. Just those two signs. So he winds up going back into Pisces again. So again, the retrograde happened, what was that date?
The retrograde back into Pisces is October 3rd.
Yeah, so October 3rd, he goes back into Pisces. So that transit was from, what was it, August 16th to October 3rd?
August 16th through September 9th. He's in oh yes, October 3rd, yes.
Yeah. So August 16th to October 3rd, he goes into Aries the first time. Then he goes retrograde back into Pisces. Then he goes forward again in Pisces, and then he goes back into Aries again. So this is also this back and forth between these two signs. What it does indicate is like we get a couple times to do it, to do the transit, to do the Mars in Pisces once, Mars in Aries once, Mars in Pisces twice, Mars in Aries twice. So it's kind of when the planets go retrograde and dance between two signs, it's a real opportunity to kind of work those two signs.
Yes. Yeah, that's where I feel that it's a very profound time for the spiritual seeker, for someone who seeks truth in themselves and who seeks right action, and to take the steps to really discipline themselves. If you're willing to face yourself and see where you can improve, really for the betterment of yourself and for the world. This is a really great transit for that, because it's purifying the heart. It's putting you in that right action and that connection to. It's like a 50-50. It's like life gives you 50% and you have to do your 50%. And I think Mars in Pisces allows that, where you can really tune into the flow, be guided, but be a conscious participant in it. And then in Aries, you get to see that reflection because you get to take it full speed ahead. And then you go back and you go forward, and it's really—
It's kind of like, it's like sort of two opportunities to like be in the dream and to like wake up from the dream and then go back to the dream again and wake up again. It's kind of like a couple chances. So that's great, Alex. I want to get Malini and Alexis in here as well I've already had a few comments, but any other comments? You know, I'd like to hear what Malini and Alexis think.
Well, I have some thoughts on that, the going back and forth with the Aries and the Pisces. My feeling when I hear about that is how Pisces really gives us what we've already been working on. Like the idea of us sort of doing the work in Pisces feels not as much right to me as that we do the work in Aries, or we did the work, whatever work we've already done spiritually is kind of what's going to unfold in Mars, in Pisces, because we have a real potential to just get aimless with our actions there. So when Mars goes into Aries, we have a chance to get disciplined again and really do physical work, because that's really what Mars is about, right? Is the physical energy that we put in. And when we go back retrograde into Pisces, that would be a time of really reflecting inward because of the retrograde nature of Mars. We're going to tune that into ourselves more than anything. It's going to become something that we're heightenedly aware of, where we're escaping and where we're maybe not doing the work, and where we're actually physically putting in that time. So I like that Mars retrograde back into Pisces for that a lot. And then, the going back and forth, because right now
we get to do it a couple times.
It can be a bit aimless, especially on the heels of that Aquarius, because people were already all wild up in their mind about what they were fighting for. And so they kind of just stayed on that run with online life and everything else. So I'm looking forward to where it goes back and forth there.
Good. Yeah.
I both of you, great points. We also have to remember that Aries is the original first sign of the zodiac, and the original 12th house of the zodiac is Pisces. And Mars is a planet which really likes to take action, and we have hammered in discipline. But and for a spiritual seeker, it's a great opportunity. But to be honest, a lot of people are not that spiritual. A lot of people who come to me are, like Alexis said, are aimless, and Pisces is a footless sign. So there is, it has a great quality of being mystical and connecting to the spirit. But if you're not connected to the spirit and you're not doing your spiritual practices, Mars can build in a lot of frustration within you, that fire and energy of Mars, which wants to take forward action. If it's not channeled appropriately internally, then can lead to a lot of frustration and anger and just imploding and exploding. And that's something, if it is building up in you, that's a sign. If frustration is building up in you, it's a sign that you're not doing your practices. You're not doing what it requires for you to take your life where you want to. Everybody has a vision for their life, and that vision for life is something that we all naturally take action towards when Mars is in Aries. Mars rules Aries, and Aries is a sign of starting stuff. It's a cardinal sign, starting stuff. It's taking things into action. But you know, Pisces is where we can check out, watch Netflix all day long, or just escape into really self-sabotaging stuff like drugs and alcohol. And you know, a lot of stuff is happening right now, and just like aimless rage can be very destructive with Mars and Pisces. And that going back and forth gives us a chance to really refine that aspect within us, things that trigger us, things that really, you know, rile us up. Why are they riling us up? Asking that question and then taking that dharmic, rightful action forward, like Alix and Alexis said.
Yeah, I think it'll be two interesting cycles when Mars goes into Aries twice, because there is the confusion, you know, the confusing possibility of Pisces, like Malini said. Most of us aren't really spiritual. Those who do have literal, you know, like spiritual gurus and practice and sadhana, Mars and Pisces is actually quite powerful for it. But if you don't, then it can be very aimless. And this first time that it goes into Aries in a couple weeks could be a very kind of explosive, like a lot of frustration is going to explode. Look for that to happen in the world for sure, because the world will always do the lowest common denominator on some level. Personally as well also. So the first transit of Mars into Aries is going to have this explosive quality. Then there'll be a retrograde back into Pisces. And then the second time it goes in will be an opportunity to not be so frustrated and triggered and be more disciplined. Alex, I want to give you the last whack at it so that you can kind of put a button on it, and then we can move on.
I think that I love conversating with all of us because we all have little bits that we put in. And I think that it's exactly right what everyone said. I don't have much more to say about it except that we'll see what happens, but it's really about if we don't have that practice, then how powerful that practice can be for us, and the reflection that can come from our actions in this process. We can see a lot about ourselves and about our world.
The last thing that I will say, though, is it's based directly on something that you said, and I wrote a note when you said about it takes more effort to hang on to the pain than it does. And the biggest lesson of Pisces, and it's the hardest thing to do, and those of you who've heard me say it before, the hardest thing we ever do in life is surrender. That's absolutely the hardest thing. That's what the whole reason we suffer is because the ego thinks it's in control. And we think we surrender, and we never surrender. The ego never surrenders. It never gives up thinking that, no, this is really me. Really, it really is. And so Mars in Pisces is exactly that thing about it's hard. It's so hard to keep up the act and to keep up the pain. And in Pisces, it's trying to surrender the pain, to surrender the game, to surrender the attachment. But instead, because we're so invested in the ego, instead of literally being able to surrender the attachment, we wind up escaping from the pain rather than surrendering the pain. And we do things to escape from the pain with drugs, alcohol, or things like we said, like Netflix and modern forms of escapism like entertainment and whatnot, instead of surrendering the pain, which is letting it go. That's the highest quality of Pisces,
Mhm.
is surrender rather than escape. That's my final word. We ready to move on to the next one?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be Malini, and we're going to talk about Jupiter, right?
Yes.
Okay, and do you want to bring up your screen, or do you want me
Yes.
just to run it here from this point of view?
Can I bring up my screen? I have
Yeah,
some.
yeah, you should be able to do it. Well, maybe I have to stop my share first. Okay, now okay, there it is.
So I'll be talking about the Jupiter transit through Capricorn. Like I said, I have this personal placement in my chart, and it's a constant work. And I'm really thankful to Sam and Alex and Alexis to allow me to present this, because it really needed me to go within and figure this out. So Jupiter is transiting through Capricorn from November 20th of this year to November 19th of next year. So it's roughly it's about 12 months. It's from April 5th to September 14th. It's going to transit into Aquarius and then retrograde back into Capricorn. And then it's going to be in Capricorn till November. Also this year we had Jupiter go into Capricorn from Sagittarius and then retrograde back through Capricorn into Sagittarius from March 29th to June 9th. And why that is important, I'll come to that in a second. So before we really understand Jupiter and Capricorn, we really need to understand the energy of Capricorn. And a lot of this I've learned from Sam. It's also available in his book called, if everybody has this, Yoga and Vedic Astrology. I highly recommend that book.
Thank you.
It's a lifesaver. So
Appreciate it.
Capricorn, the Sanskrit name is Makara, which really means crocodile. And you know, if you just have the image of crocodile in your mind, it says a lot about the sign. So directly from Sage Parashara, he says Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. It's a tamasic sign, earthy, southern, vigorous at night, back rising, large limbed, many colored, moving in watery ground, 4-footed at the beginning, like a crocodile, and without feet at the end, which is the tail part of it, and is imagined as the water goer. And the 4-footed in the front and tail in the back, like a crocodile, is a very important symbol of Capricorn, because the feet allow Capricorn, the crocodile, to move slowly on the ground, but the combination of the feet and the tail and water is extremely powerful, which gives the crocodile a lot of speed. So that's something to ponder and think about and contemplate on. Capricorn is an internal feminine sign. It's associated with the worker caste or the worker bees. People with a lot of planets in Capricorn are generally seen to be working hard. It's a sign of Saturn too. It represents the front of the thighs and down to the knees. And if you think really about the front of your thighs and the knees, that portion of the body gives you a lot of support. It supports the upper body. It also gives you mobility. The knee is such an important aspect for movement and flexibility and mobility. And it's also the most vulnerable part of your body, right? It's very vulnerable. Any injury to your thighs, your knees, you cannot move. The pain lasts forever. So the spiritual lesson of Capricorn and planets in Capricorn is really finding security and peace. Shanti is the root word for Saturn, Shani. Shanti comes from Shani. So finding security and peace within rather than external material wealth and achievement. And then also internalizing the awareness of limitation of time, relationships, resources, and death, internalizing that towards inner awakening rather than external material pursuit, or manipulation and control of resources and people, or just hoarding wealth to feel secure. So Capricorn is where we really feel insecure. We are aware of the looming death and the limitation of life, and the worldly tamasic side of Capricorn will, the lower expression of this energy is trying to hoard stuff to feel secure, hoard relationships, hoard money, manipulate things. But the higher quality, the tail, and moving swiftly in the water is spirituality and mysticism if we are able to tap into it. But it's hard, of course. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it. Jupiter, called Guru, is literally the guru of the devas or the gods, and really the abstract and higher principles of life. He's the guru of abstract and higher principles and philosophies that connect to life beyond this planet. And Sage Parashara says Jupiter is large-bodied, yellow-haired, eyed, and kapha in nature, intelligent, proficient in all shastras. Evolutionary process of Jupiter, and this I've learned directly from Sam, and I apply it all the time whenever I think about Jupiter, is from excessive material growth and attachment, which is the lower tamasic quality, to an over-reliance upon man-made worldly philosophies, where we are just engaged in philosophies on an intellectual level, the rajasic mind, to the highest universal wisdom, which is very intangible. It can only be felt and experienced, right? That's the evolutionary process of Jupiter. The key things that one needs to keep in mind when we think about Jupiter is faith. Faith comes, Jupiter is really, involved with faith, and people who commit suicide, they have a crisis of Jupiter, so to say. Faith and hope, knowledge, expansion, children, they expand us, and you learn through children. Education, spirituality, teachers, teachings. Children also are the biggest teachers in your life, so Jupiter is an indicator of children. Optimism, religion, orthodox belief systems, and in the highest form it is really mysticism, right? Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which is directly opposite Capricorn, because the mystical abstract qualities of Jupiter, the higher qualities of Jupiter, the sattvic qualities of Jupiter, are easily expressed in Cancer, which is also a sattvic sign, through emotional intuition. And the word I'm using here is bhava. And there is no, if you look up bhava, English translation of bhava is emotion. It's not really emotion. It's that deeper connection, heartfelt connection to something greater than just this physical plane. So in Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, it's very easy to develop that bhav, which really leads to a deeper inner unfolding. Now we have talked about Jupiter and we have talked about Capricorn, and we've talked about Jupiter. Let's see Jupiter in Capricorn, which is directly opposite Cancer. And it is, I generally don't like to use the word debilitated, but I'm using it here so that we can put things into context. Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn for a few different things, and I've listed it here. Its expansive nature, Jupiter is like naturally expansive, and Capricorn is a constricted sign where you're like, you feel very insecure. So the materiality of the world really feels constrictive to Jupiter's nature in Capricorn. The tamasic nature of Capricorn is a tamasic sign, which is driven by fear, insecurity, preserving life on Earth. It really interrupts with the mystical nature of Jupiter, which wants to connect to the devas, right? Jupiter is the guru of devas, connecting to things beyond this planet. Hope, intuition, connecting to something beyond this earth is interrupted, and it can also lead to either an orthodox belief system and rigidity, but also a kind of rigid atheism, And it develops because there is a difficulty in identifying good teachings. And I put spiritual in parentheses because at the end of the day, we are all trying to connect to something higher. So there's a difficulty in finding good teachings, and that disappointment that it brings makes a person just rigid in their own ways, or just an atheist, or leads them to, if the person is acting on a higher vibration, would look for teachers or teachings within themselves. So like I said, it creates disappointments in others, especially in teachers. And it's mainly because of our own internal projections onto this external teachers that brings in disappointments. Jupiter in Capricorn accumulates wealth through penny pinching. So it's not that venture capitalist, investment banker kind of expansion. It's very penny pinching, miserly behavior where you'll count every penny, every cent, and save it. So saving is big with Jupiter and Capricorn, because its innate nature of feeling expansive is interrupted. And also Capricorn is a sign where we are very aware of the shortcomings of life, so you try to save every penny you can. In current times, we can see how COVID-19 pandemic has brought about so much unemployment, and it happened, the whole after effects, which I said up here from March 29th, is when most cities in US went in a lockdown to June, almost end of June.
I would also say much of the world, because the world then kind of recovered, but almost the whole world from March 29th to June 29th, whatever those dates were. What were the dates?
March 29th to June 29th.
Yeah, so that was kind of globally, though. That's when it sort of affected the whole world.
Yes.
And now most of the world has kind of gotten over it. We're still stuck in it.
Yeah, so it brought about a lot of unemployment, and really understanding the value of saving money and not just living your life.
I'm going to pull up the chart.
On the fly.
I'm going to pull up the chart, okay?
Okay. Do you want me to stop?
No, I can just do it. Go ahead.
Okay. So the whole, unemployment and pandemic really highlighted the importance of saving money, rather than having this illusionary dream of we'll always have money and we'll always have employment and we'll always have a job. That was very prominent from March 29th to June 29th, and still a lot of people are unemployed.
So we want to wrap up and bring in some others here for the last bit here.
I'm going to wrap it up.
Yeah.
And so that's something really important to remember. The spiritual lesson of Jupiter in Capricorn is really learning that the external world and man-made philosophies will eventually disappoint us, as everything will fall short of that eternal wisdom. And Jupiter in Capricorn urges us to find hope within ourselves and connect to a deeper inner silence amongst all the external chaos. A couple of stories that really one should contemplate on is, Arjuna's enlightenment on the battlefield in the Kurukshetra war, where he was, and his enlightenment came through Krishna, who was a charioteer, and his charioteer, and charioteers were considered as lower caste people. Also, Bhishma's enlightenment on a bed of arrows. He was fighting the war and got shot several times. And then he lay on these bed of arrows for 58 long days. And in that process, Krishna showed him his Vishwarupa and he gained enlightenment. I also like to remember a quote that I heard from Manoj Chalam, but it really applies in this case, which is, if you're a carpenter, chances are after enlightenment, you will still be a carpenter. So really like humbling down in the daily life and trying to live on this planet, but living from a higher place. rather than being bogged down by the struggles of life.
Great. Well, great presentation.
Thank you.
That's great. And I'm going to bring Alix and Alexis. What do you have comments?
Well, it's funny what Malini just ended with. It made me remember one of the sayings or phrases that one of my elders says, which is, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Right.
And I think that that's important with this Jupiter in Capricorn, is that I seem to always see the positive in things, and that's really what I think of it there, especially with Saturn also being there, the ruler of Capricorn, for all of Jupiter's transit, is that we can really learn that we can find God in scrubbing the floors, that we can find higher wisdom through anything that we do. It's a struggle, it's more difficult, but I believe that it can bring a certain sobering reality, that we can be both connected while dealing with the struggles, and can be a lot of power there, I think, in the process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Malini, I like how you brought in obviously the tangible things that we've been seeing with Jupiter, as it already poked its head in Capricorn and then went back into Sagittarius. We already saw that pressure on money, and that fear around money, and that fear around growth. What were your predictions about were there predictions in your handout? I didn't mean to rush you, but with the monetary situation going forward, or anything like that?
I didn't have predictions there, but what I had one more point, which is through 2020 and 2021, the rest of 2021, while Jupiter goes through Capricorn and Aquarius, there will be this slow climb out from this economic crisis, as we have seen after the 2008 crash. In 2008, 2009, Jupiter was in Capricorn, and there was this slow but steady climb out but people were still freaked out. Similarly, in 1985, we were seeing the effects of Ronald Reagan's trickle-down economics, wherein the unemployment rate was at the highest in that 10-year window. It was at like 16% or something. And we were seeing the after effects of the Reaganomics, as it is called, when Jupiter was in Capricorn, and then there was a slow climb out from there. So it really requires us to, I feel like we'll have a similar situation where we'll step out of what we are going through, but slowly and steadily and step by step, doing step by step. That's a big concept about Capricorn energies. It's step-by-step process. It's not like one day everything is all right kind of a moment.
Right. This is exactly what I would say. This is exactly what I thought as well. And it's also because Saturn is there with Jupiter.
Yes.
And so we saw the constriction, and you use the example of Reaganomics, and then the last time Jupiter went through here as well, in the 2008, that crash that happened then, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It was late 2008, early 2009.
Right. And this is right when that, so it was a little after we had the big, the big Wall Street crash, no, it was right when it happened. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. But Saturn being there is going to show that support.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, that slow climb out shows that Saturn support, because that's what Saturn is. It's rebuilding the structure, recommitting to building that wealth again.
Yes.
And the only thing that I'll add, and then we'll bring Alexis in, is that this transition from Sagittarius to Capricorn is also a big one, because again, it's where that hope and inspiration of Sagittarius, which of course is ruled by Jupiter, comes into the material pressure and time and all of that stuff of Capricorn. This is what makes the Jupiter, quote, debilitated, is it takes it out of the oh, I'm so inspired, and brings it into the now I need to do the work. Mm-hmm. But almost everyone I've ever met, especially, I have so many great students and people who have Jupiter and Capricorn, if they get good teachings, they'll really work hard on them. They'll really commit. They're looking for hope and inspiration, and usually they're looking for a good good teachings that are time tested, that are practical, that they can put into practice. So many times, again, and not just exemplified by students, but even this whole next era of Jupiter going through Capricorn is actually a great time to take those things that inspire you, which is Jupiter, and actually work on them, actually work hard, actually learn, let's say like astrology, actually learn it. Don't just go, oh, it inspires me. Jupiter going through Capricorn, we're going to want to put our teachings into practice with some practical hard work and really learn this stuff and do it well. So again, even though planets are, quote, debilitated somewhere, that just means that it requires a little more effort. But of all the debilitated placements, probably Jupiter in Capricorn to me is the least problematic. Like when I see it there, I'm not as worried about it, especially if Saturn is strong, because it really, again, it tends to bring that quality of Jupiter into the practical effort of Capricorn and can really develop those virtues, especially of manifesting that higher wisdom, so that it's not just something that sort of makes us high. Oh, I'm so inspired, and then just we stay in that realm. So Alexis, do you have some comments on this? Oh, sorry, Alexis, I had you muted. Sorry, you have to unmute. Sorry.
Oh, you did mute me. Okay. I was just saying, I appreciated your comments, and Malini, I really like the way you laid that out for us. One thing that didn't really get mentioned that I just want to throw in there is that Capricorn is a lot about staying alive, right? There's the long haul, there's the long road, and it's a lot about preservation, especially with Saturn there. And we saw as Jupiter did dip its head into Capricorn before, we immediately went into this sort of, the wisdom or the ruling thing that we're all passing around and that everyone's believing in is all about safety and how can we keep everybody alive. And that, as Jupiter went back into Sagittarius, we've seen, at least here, there's been sort of people maybe not adhering to that as much, or it's been a little bit going out into the world and traveling again, like Sagittarius, and how can we do something else? And as we see it go back into Capricorn, I foresee more of the sort of rules around safety and everyone keeping each other in check, but also, I mean, Jupiter, it does have to do with actual laws and stuff like that also. So I see more of that sort of constrictive safety first. Let's all survive. The most important thing is survival and not dying, which is kind of, we didn't really talk about the COVID or the health part. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Any last thoughts on this? Great presentation, Malini. Excellent.
Yeah, I want to echo what Sam and Alexis said about being practical. Do what is practical and sustainable while Jupiter goes through a Capricorn. It's not about like a 10-day fast. If you're doing intermittent fasting, try with 4 hours. Staying safe, do what is practical, what is sustainable. And that's a very big theme of Jupiter through Capricorn. Yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Absolutely. Great job. And so we throw it to Alexis, and she's going to talk about Rahu transit into Taurus and Ketu through Scorpio. Oops, where are we at? Yeah, we got to go back here.
It's September.
Yeah,
19th.
September 21st or something.
Well, it's the 19th, but it's kind of late in the evening. So if you could do the 20th if you want to make it safe.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll get it there.
Or the 23rd. Yeah. Whatever. Anytime past the 19th.
Yeah.
Works. So we have our nodal axis switching here, and the nodes really bring us a lot of attention to our karma and what we have to resolve, where K2 is, what's needing completion, and what we're really focusing our energy on with Rahu. And we've seen the dramatic emphasis on the world stage and probably personally with with Rahu and Gemini and Ketu and Sagittarius, where information and beliefs and all of these kind of things were really what our focus has been on. The information more than anything else has been what we've really seen just blasted all over the internet, and it's really stemming from people's beliefs down in Sagittarius. So as these nodes switch into the Taurus Scorpio axis, we see a few things happen. First of all, Taurus Scorpio is often referred to as sort of the exalted axis for these two nodes. And the reason is because Taurus is very grounded. It's an earth sign. It's practical. It's where we're focused on material possessions, but in a very pleasant and harmonious way. We want to grow gardens. We want to plant food. We want to make things beautiful. We want to get along with people. We want to have sensory pleasures. We want to enjoy our life, and we want to enjoy it with other people as well. So when Rahu moves into there, the sort of erratic energy of the North Node, which for those of you who don't know, it's the head without a body, and it's an open mouth just devouring anything that it can, it's a little more grounded. There's not as much room for that sort of airy quality where we're just getting information from all different places, because we're working with the tangible, we're working with the material. And Taurus is also a sign that really focuses on the long haul. So we have a potential to plant a garden that will last for a long time. We have a potential to do things that will make our lives actually better, and security for ourselves, and secure that security in ways that feel good to us, rather than just being about safety and what needs to be done. So there's a lot of very pleasant qualities to this transit, especially from where we've been coming. On a global scale, we can really move away from just writing about things and talking about things, and actually physically do things in our own communities, in our own homes. And I always like to look at sort of the positive side. I like to imagine that the positive aspects come about, but I also like to address where things fall short. And one of the things that can happen with Rahu and Taurus is we can get overly obsessed with materialism, or overly obsessed with food, luxury, pleasure, stuff like that. So that's one of the things we just have to be kind of careful about. I did do a report that I have on my website if you sign up for my email list, where I go through each of the signs, because it makes a really big difference, as Sam and I were talking about in the beginning, of where the shift is for you. If you're a Taurus like myself, it's going to be a shift onto your identity. So beyond all those things that I just spoke about Taurus, it's going to be a focus on who you are as a person. If you're a Gemini, it's going to be moving into more of the mode of escape, and trying to kind of veer away from society and becoming a little bit less present with the world. So it really makes a big difference what house these nodes rule for you, as far as the effect in your physical life. But as always with Rahu, there's the driving force of what we're learning new on the Rahu end is really stemming from where Ketu is on the southern end. That is the part we don't want to look at. Ketu is just the body without the head, and it's where we feel like we've already learned everything, but we really haven't. There's something we still need to know in this world. And that's very important, because if we don't look at that, then we'll just obsess over the top part. So we could just obsess over, getting everything we want in Taurus, and making sure that we have enough food to eat, and that if there's another shutdown, we can, we have all of our possessions that we want. But if we're not looking at what our fears are, where K2 is in Scorpio, then we're not going to be able to really have a healed axis here. So K2 in Scorpio is sort of a fascinating placement, because Scorpio is where we have these shadowy places that we don't really want to look at. We have our fears. We have, some of them are irrational. A lot of them have reason to them, like the scorpion itself. It's, it can hurt you if it bites you, but if you actually look at it, it's quite small, and you're more likely to be able to kill it than it can actually hurt you. So there's a lot of blowing up of our fears in Scorpio, and we have a tendency to ride the sort of emotional roller coaster there. When K2 gets in there, we pull away from the emotional roller coaster. We're not as engaged with our fears, but we have this really strong past life and even maybe early childhood tie there that allows us to do the spiritual work to really look at where our fears are coming from. And the interesting thing about the nodes is that they move backwards. So when normally we're progressing from Taurus, we're going into Gemini. Normally we're progressing from Scorpio, we're going into Sagittarius. So we're healing our issues in intimate relationships in many ways in Scorpio. Our fear of death, yes, and our fear of death even more of someone we love on the deepest level, but maybe just losing someone we love, or not being able to trust somebody, or having them take our heart and rip it out and throw it away. And then we move into the place of Sagittarius, where we see the world in this more universal light. But in this case, we're going backwards. And where the nodes is very different from the north end and the south end. The south end is right on the Gandanta point. We're going to see a shift from Mula, where we pull the roots out of all the things that aren't working, and then a clean break with no node to draw us into Scorpio, and falling into the early degrees of Scorpio, where we have Jaista. And this jump from fire to water, as opposed to the water to fire that we normally see the planets transit, it's taking all that we just pulled up in our universal wisdom, and instead of planting seeds for the future, we're actually having to go backwards and look at our intimate connections with people. One of the things that's come up a lot recently is people canceling each other out, or blocking friends, ending relationships from years long because they don't agree on the same opinion, or even family members. So a lot of heat has come up with this sort of Ketu and Mula phase, where we've just been ripping out everything. And when we go back to Scorpio, we have to face what our deep fears actually are intimately with one another, and go beyond just the beliefs and the ideas, and move into that space of our own personal triggers and our own personal fears and our own personal shadows. And Jaista gives us the courage to do that. Jaista is ruled by Indra, the king of the gods. And while he's sort of foolhardy sometimes and makes guffaws and creates havoc with the things he does, he kind of comes around to save the day at the end. He shows where we're courageous and where we can stand tall in our beliefs and really do the work that needs to be done, even if we've made really bad mistakes, even if we've embarrassed ourselves, even if we've done everything wrong. And it's really an opportunity for us to kind of break our own chains of fear that hold us, and allow ourselves to move out of that space, if we're willing to do the work there, if we're willing to do that work that K2 offers us there. So the other end of that is that in Rahu, we have Mrigasira, both in Taurus and Gemini. So we've been doing the spiritual seeking in Gemini since Rahu moved into there. And now, instead of it going from the earth plane to the air plane, where we have a tangible feeling of we want to seek something different, and we go out and mentally find what that looks like, we're going in the opposite direction, where we've sort of mentally been seeking, and now we're going to plant some stuff with that. We're going to actually do the physical grounding work with our energy in Taurus, in the Taurus end of Mrigasira. Mrigasira is the deer's head, and it's where we're seeking spirit through a flight of sorts. We're taking off because we realize where we are doesn't really work for us as much anymore. So in this way, we're almost going backwards to where things maybe used to be a long time ago, with victory gardens and with neighbors helping neighbors, and with people really taking their hands and building things and doing work to make their lives better, instead of just going out into the world constantly and finding their happiness, or really not finding their happiness in the hustle and bustle of the workplace and friends and bars and all these different things that have become more important than even our values, than even our home. And that's really what Taurus is about. It's our values. It's what we value, and it shows in our possessions. It shows in what we spend money on. And it also is how we value ourselves and our own life and our own well-being. So I can say a little bit more, but I would love to hear some weighing in as well, if you guys want to do that. And
we'll weigh in here a little bit. Alix and Malini, you have some comments? I have some things to say, and then we'll let Alexis also finish up here.
So like Alexis said, beautiful Alexis, thank you for illuminating us with that. The Taurus and Scorpio axis, Taurus is where we seek to be secure, and everything is driven by stability and security, and the Scorpio axis is where everything feels insecure, where we are really transforming ourselves, and all the inner insecurities and fears and things, like Alexa said, death, all of that comes to surface. And Rahu moving into Taurus and Ketu moving into Scorpio, it's their exaltation signs, allows us, it gives us the opportunity to stay in the community, to stay with people, do the work, while also, because Ketu end of the node is really drilling down into our deepest fears and triggers and frustrations and things that don't feel good, instead of disconnecting from them, because there's a tendency with Ketu to disconnect. But in Scorpio, Ketu has that intelligence and that wisdom to really drill down and then figure out what doesn't work, like dig it out and figure out what doesn't work. So being engaged while doing that internal work is a really beautiful place to be in, instead of doing either or. And this transit gives us that opportunity, given that what we are going through as a world, on a healthcare basis, on an economic basis, on a social basis, is yes, let's engage with each other, do the work, but also what's coming up within me, let that come up and, you know, address that, not just disconnect from ourselves.
Alex?
Yeah, I really agree with everything and appreciate everything that everyone has said, because it really does feel like stabilizing in the fact that even Rahu and Ketu are leaving that point of the galaxy, that Artra Mula, and really going into somewhere where now we can stabilize and we can reflect, and Ketu leaving Mula, where we're not so much just pulling things up at the root, and there's a lot of that destruction and that hunger to kind of uproot, but more where we're now having the ability to actually go deep and dig into our heart and dig into ourselves. And I think that that's very stabilizing in itself if we're willing to go there.
Yeah, and what I'll add as well is that right now we're with this Rahu in Gemini, Ketu in Sagittarius, it can be very ungrounding, because that's literally what it's doing. It's shifting our paradigm. Like I said, when Rahu first went into Gemini and Ketu in Sagittarius, that it was going to be a time when by the end of it, we're not going to really know what's true and what's real, because we actually really don't know what's true and what's real. We have a lot of beliefs about it and a lot of ideas about the beliefs. And these things revolve what we share collectively in things like politics and all this. We'll have a bunch of ideas about what the world is really like. And this cycle, more than most that we've ever seen, is just blown that whole paradigm to the moon. And we've seen everybody go back and forth. I mean, if you were on the, let's just talk about even just like about the politics in general, people that were now so much on the left are now so far on the right, and we're back and forth. And we just, it's been scrambled. The chessboard has been scrambled so much, but we're also very ungrounded and not really tethered to a collective reality and identity anymore. At least we had a kind of stability underneath it all. And Rahu and Ketu going through the Gemini Sagittarius axis has really scrambled that. So going into Taurus and Scorpio is going to reestablish and reconnect us around common values, is what I would say. And take us out of all these dumb philosophies, because there's really one or two games that are happening, and it's all about money and corruption. It's the same game that's been run forever. It's really not new. Now that we have things like the internet and the age of spin and media, it looks like it's a new game. It's not. It's just a new variation on an old theme, with everybody now as an expert and this post-factual world. I said that by the end of it, it was just going to exhaust us. We were just going to be utterly exhausted by ourselves. We'll make ourselves sick now. Like we don't even want to think about anything. So we're so ungrounded. But returning back to that stability, because I do see that the main reason I see Rahu and Ketu in this axis as being exalted is because of the stability and a common stability. Rahu calms down in Taurus, and Ketu goes deep in Scorpio, which is what they both want to do on some level. So this is going to be a more stabilizing influence, where we're going to start being more practical also about things, again, and get kind of out of all of the conspiratorial thinking and all of that, because we're going to have to. You know, all of that's fine and dandy, but at some point, are we going to let it just destroy the entire world? It seems like we might be now, but when the nodes shift and get out of this Gemini Sagittarius and get into Taurus, where it's going to threaten our food and our schools and our children and all this, we're going to come back to earth and come back to some common human and humane value system, because underneath it all, that's what Taurus is. And we're also going to, as Alexis said so well, the K2 end of the node, which is in Scorpio, is going to really dig deep into our insecurities about why are we so triggered and what is the common values that we share. So this is what I would say in a general sense that would add a little perhaps to what Alexis was saying. Alexis, you have the final word here.
I really appreciate that on the world stage that you're talking about, because I think ultimately, more than anything, we're sort of taking the ideas and the stuff that's not real, that's just thoughts, words, and beliefs and ideals, and bringing it to what's real. And what's real is what we do physically on the front end, and what we, what our emotional reality is drives a lot of that. So I really appreciate us moving into an axis where we can focus more on what we can actually do. We can spiritually and mentally heal ourselves, and we can physically put our hands in the earth and do something, and not just yell at everybody about stuff we don't know, or we're not in their shoes. People who don't have kids are commenting on people, what people should do with kids, and everybody's sort of commenting on everyone else's life right now. So this axis really brings it to yes, we'll focus on kids in school, and it'll be the people who actually have kids and their kids are actually in school and they actually have to do that.
Yeah, and you talk and it goes the gamut. If even when we're talking about issues, everybody's an expert on what should happen with Black people, and none of them are Black or something.
Right, exactly.
Or whatever it might be. I mean, we can just go and everybody's canceled, and like you said, we're just canceling everybody who doesn't agree with us. Yeah.
There's a quick little image I just want to put in our heads. There's a story from the collection Ganesha Goes to Lunch about Indra right after he's captured. He's fighting at Ravana's castle in Lanka, and his son, Ravana's son, whose name is Meghananda, captures him with his own web of illusion, and he then gets dubbed Indrajit by Brahma because he's captured. He's the one who's now conquered Indra. And Indra, in this story, the way they tell it, he's sitting in his jail cell with all these shackles on, and he's complaining to Brahma, like, oh, you still let Vayu, and he's running the wind around Ravana's castle, and this is happening, and everyone else is not caring about me sitting here shackled. And finally, by the end of it, Brahma's like, release your anger, release your tears, release your blame, release this. And by the end, he manages to get the shackles off himself because he's released all his blame that he was putting on everyone else for keeping him there. So that's my blessing for all of us as we go forward here.
Yeah, it's a lot going on. This transit of Rahu through Gemini has been more transformative than I had thought. I mean, I said it when it happened, but I was like, let's watch and see how this plays out. I'm like, I have no idea it's going to be this much. I'm like, whoa, God. All right.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything else to add on this transit? Okay. So I'll take us into the eclipse. And actually, before I do that, let me just, I want to just share, oops, do I have it here? Wait a second. I wanted to actually just share something here, wait a minute, that is from the, yeah, here it is. Let me pull this up. Whoops, 1 second. Stop share, sorry. Let me just go here. Whoops, I still didn't do it. One more time. I'm gonna pull this screen up here and then try it again. So yeah, here it is. If people, I'll put the link, but it's actually just 2020 vedicastrology.com. I actually did a forecast, and some of these things that we're talking about were in the 2020 forecast. Many of these are, and it's free. You can check this out. I also do a detailed explanation of Saturn in Capricorn, which is where he is for almost the next 3 years. So you can go there. It's just 2020 vedicastrology.com, and then you can just reserve your seat. And I actually wanted to pull this up too because I wanted to see the date. It's December 14th. So that's the date of the of this eclipse. So let me pull that up, and December 14th. But that I do those forecasts every year, and I went back and looked at it. It's you know, we're still only half the way through, but it's still pretty prophetic the way these things play out. And I talked about these 10 shifts. You know, many of them happened earlier in the year, and again, it happened before COVID and all that stuff. And it's remarkable how accurate this stuff plays out. So you can check that out. But so we have this. This is the eclipse at the end of the year, December 14th. You see, it's in Scorpio, and it's this Jeshta eclipse. And of course, you know, the solar eclipses are the ones that we focus on more. And again, last year in 2019, we had this solar eclipse right on like Christmas. And this was right when all of the COVID stuff got released. 2 weeks later, when we had the lunar eclipse in Ardra, that day or the day after was when China first said, hey, we think we have a new coronavirus, and watch out, world, because we think we have just released a new, you know, novel coronavirus, which is scary. So that was last year with that crazy eclipse, all those planets in Mula. Well, this year we have them all in Jeshta. Okay, we're done. I don't know. So now we have them all in Jeshta. Good Lord. God help us. I had to pick this one. Okay, so of course this is that part of Scorpio, which is about as Alexis just talked about. You know, it's about this uprooting, and she did a great. Or I'm sorry, it's about the what happens with the nodes. And I actually wanted to say this because I'm so glad that Alexis talked about this unwinding and this going backwards. The nodes move backwards. I did a whole course on this one time about how our karmas unwind with the nodes going backwards. And we're kind of unwinding this karma from Mula to Jeshta. And we can see that with these eclipses. And Alexis referred to it very well with we're sort of uprooting and canceling people with all these planets in Mula. And what happens, you know, before that is the qualities of Jeshta, and which is about, it's ruled by Indra, who was the king, and it's really the star of warfare and the star of battles. And it has a lot to do with politicians, politics, worldly affairs, at least I mean, it's also, you know, a deeply spiritual nakshatra, especially the spiritual warrior. For those who are spiritual and who have planets in Jeshta, there's a need to spiritualize and to become a spiritual warrior. But it's also one that is very worldly in the sense that you'll see that when people have a lot of important planets in Jeshta, they wind up being very interested in things like politics and other things that give power. Anytime you see someone, you know, anything that has to do with a king or that sort of thing, you'll know that in a secular sense, it has to do with things like politics or business titans. This is why you see a lot of crossover there between, you know, leaders of business and politics and politicians. So this nakshatra of Jeshta comes before Mula in the regular order because it shows where we can, if it's in a spiritual sense, we can have the emotional and spiritual heroism to really dig deeply into our vulnerabilities and transform them, because the vulnerabilities, of course, come from Scorpio. Jeshta is that part that is about, again, having the emotional courage to not just blame everybody and fight with everybody who has triggered us, which is the negative quality of Jeshta, but instead to look at why we feel vulnerable and confront our own emotional cowardice and our own projections, and then be the hero in our own hero's journey. and then it can be a very disciplined nakshatra. And then the next nakshatra of Mula is where we can then pull the things out by the roots and plant in, you know, inspiring seeds of karma, and it can play that way. So when you unwind it, we're going from this potential of like the sort of cancel culture, the kind of pulling everything out by the roots and, you know, sort of destroying things indiscriminately, to going back to what's more empowering. And I think culturally, there's also some great lessons that can be seen here, and especially for revealing the weakness of the, let's say in a worldly sense, the weakness of our leaders, the weakness of our systems. And again, rather than just fighting with each other and trying to destroy each other because of our ideas about things, because we're supporting this politician or this version of truth that we know so well, that we're so hip to, which we really don't know any of it. We're just kind of, again, moving pieces on the chessboard based on all kinds of data that's really very ungrounded. Instead of doing all that, there's a great opportunity to see revealed and laid bare the raw, naked hypocrisy, the domination structures that have us captive by the time we get to this. Especially this is happening in middle of December. This is going to be after, like, for example, the US election. That's going to be a real mess. We might not even be finished with the election by this time. There could be all kinds of things going on, crises and whatnot, constitutional crises and whatnot, which all of that's really possible at this, with this eclipse coming by the middle of December. But we're going to see the system laid bare, and there could be some real explosive things that happen. I'm talking about the US, but that could affect things globally as well. There's that part of it, of course, and we should not minimize that. But again, we also have to understand that this is, you know, Ketu is exalted here, and Rahu is also exalted. This comes after the nodes move out of this place of being triggered into a place where we will have had a paradigm of almost a couple months of the nodes in this more empowering and more empowered and stable axis. Because one of the things that also makes the nodes powerful here is that these are two fixed signs. Taurus and Scorpio have an investment in things being stable. Again, Gemini and Taurus, Gemini and Sagittarius, where they are now, are not. They're about duality. They're about change. So people should understand change is like 1/4 of life is change. And we see that 1/4 of life playing out in the dual signs. The signs of Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces show how about 1/3 of life is changing things. And when the nodes get in those axes of dual signs, there's often a lot of change. Then they move into the stable signs that are fixed, and we want to have stability again. So that's going to be an imperative. Now, what the fixed signs also do is show some frustration, and we have to be aware of that as well. But I think that on a global sense, we could see this volatility for sure, and there could be, my fear or my potential is this war, this possible even, I don't want to say civil war, but this battle and this struggle that takes place with, especially in the US, a non-peaceful transition of power, I think is very likely, very possible for sure, where it won't be smooth. But on a personal level, again, we have to understand that this is an extremely transformational and empowering time if you are an empowered being. If you are, like a yogi or someone who is trying to know the nature of the self, this is an extremely empowering eclipse. And again, those qualities of Scorpio, which are about facing our fears and vulnerabilities with heroism and courage. We not only have Ketu, Sun, and Moon there, but we also have Mercury, which is about intelligence and discrimination. We can focus on the fact that the Moon is debilitated. It's actually pretty far from the debilitation degree, but it's still in that sign of debilitation where we can tend to feel not so emotionally grounded. And it's happening at the last degrees here as well, where the Sun and Moon are also in the Gandanta point. So it's a very volatile and unstable eclipse. I'll invite some commentary on this now.
Wow.
Anyone?
Well, the one thing I'm noticing is that Mars, that whole Mars transit we were talking about earlier with Mars in Pisces is the ruler of this eclipse. And it's in that spiritual placement in Pisces where we're either escaping or connecting to something real. So I see that being a real divide of people, like those who are really in a spiritual place, really getting something powerful out of this, especially with, Venus is an Anurata, too, very devotional. But once we see how the majority of people who, like Malini said, are not spiritual,
Yeah.
This could be pretty spaced out and a lot of escapism and a lot of people not being present with what is.
On a worldly level, it definitely has some very sinister potential, right?
Yeah.
We have to just say it. It definitely,
Yeah.
there's no question. There's no other way to look at it. A couple other things that I didn't mention is Jupiter's also at its deepest debilitation point.
Yeah.
If someone was going to mention it. And it,
Like
it's very close
to
to Saturn as well. Again, so there's some very strong Nichabanga here. So I don't consider that as bad as people might, but it's going to show a feeling of a lack of hope, but the need to stay determined and to stay practical. But we should expect this isn't, especially leading up to it, a couple days before 12th, 13th, 14th, this is no joke. This is no joke.
Yeah, this eclipse really ties up everything that we were talking about. We have Jupiter in Capricorn, we have Mars in Pisces, that Jupiter is aspecting Rahu, but from a very debilitated place. Saturn is aspecting Mars. And so nothing feels good. And, like Alex said, we need spiritual warriors because nothing will feel good, but has a lot of potential. And all those planets in Jeshta, yes, we, like Sam, you said, we will see all these corrupt politicians and lawmakers be exposed and stuff like that. But it also opens up this energy for really authentic elders to show up and step into power, who have been just, sitting back, chilling, watching the show. It's time, I do believe that given that Rahu and Ketu both are very stable and powerful in this axis, that the elders who have been just sitting back and not participating will start participating in the dialogue, and also empowering the youngsters. So Jeshta has this quality of being the old crone, right? And the highest vibration of the old crone, or that energy, that wisdom, is not being the king, but being the king maker. And so really, like, empowering the youth, empowering people to step into their highest expression. And I do believe that after the eclipse has passed, and both the solar and lunar, we'll see all these elders step into the game and take action.
I think let me say this, and then I'll bring Alex in. I also think one of the things you have to understand is Jeshta is a military and militant star, and so there could be some military action, including things like calls to rally the military around a president who won't leave, or I don't know, some things like this, or where you could have these kinds of look. It's already being talked about. This isn't even a bold prediction, frankly.
Yeah,
it's already being talked about. We already have a president who is probably, he's already said that he's not sure he would, trust the results. We already know what that means. And again, the military that has the final say in all of this. So these ideas, whether or not it gets to any kind of conflict or whatever, these are going to be ideas at this time. I think I could say pretty clearly that we will be thinking about these things at that time.
Yeah. Can feel like gloom and doom. It probably can feel like gloom and doom and everything is about to rip apart.
Yeah. Alex?
All I would add is one of the things that I associate with gesture or think about and talk about with people when they have a lot of planets there and things like that is about protection, spiritual protection and energetic protection, where the symbols are the amulet, like the protective amulet, and also the white umbrella that's supposed to protect and kind of shield and also kind of keep the light around the higher energies. And so I would say with everything that we're talking about and all of the potentials that we're remembering, and especially with the ruling planet Mars in Pisces, is that we're remembering that through the process to protect ourselves and to be a part of what's happening and present for it, but also to just be aware that we have the power that Indra power and that courage to protect our energetic body and our physical body through the process. It's just something to kind of keep in mind, to have that protection as something to remember.
Absolutely. And, we're talking about the worldly part of it, but underneath it all, there's always, the spiritual potential. Like I said, Indra was a great spiritual warrior, spiritual king. And that's really the potential of all eclipses, is it shifts energy really quickly. It shifts the paradigm. And in this case, it's an exalted Ketu there with the sun. Let me pull it up again. But these are powerful energies. Anytime you get a bunch of energy collected, in fact, that one we had last year, we can focus on. A couple of weeks later, we had COVID or whatever, but it was also, for me, it was like just explosive. Amazing spiritual breakthroughs. And when this much energy is concentrated, when we get eclipses for spiritual seekers, it's literally like a portal opening. We can't pretend like that's not the case. The world is what the world is. So we can talk about it and we can talk about those kinds of things on that level, but internally, the world is outside. But for a spiritual seeker, this is enormous potential and power all lined up at one time. And so Kundalini experiences, all of this kind of connection to the astral body and the other world, this is right where this stuff exists. Mula is related to the Muladhara chakra. Jeshta is right before this section of the zodiac. This is why it's so transformative, because it tends to obliterate the outer stuff to shake us up and get us on a new trajectory in that way that's beyond this world. And so, of course, all of that is there. And all those stories of Indra, who was the king, again, it's not just of the outer world, but he was the great rishi, a great, seeker and a spiritual adept. He was like Shiva in this regard. He had his attendants that would, throw lightning bolts down to awaken the spiritual power. But again, these are all metaphors for the fact that we're living a dull, boring life through the senses, and we don't do anything until our world gets blown up, until something gets shaken up. Otherwise, again, the external world, it just dulls our mind. We're just trying to be happy and have everything be nice, and then nothing happens. So this is why you see all of this transformational, all these gods where things blow up and explode and all this. This is a metaphor for our need to have our comfort zone blow up and explode. And we don't do anything until something screws up our world. So we've been seeing a lot of it. And so the potential here for that eclipse is definitely, it's an incredibly rich spiritual opportunity as well. So the last thing that I'll say about it is that it almost demands, like, look at the times we're in right now. Look at how it polarizes light and dark. Since we had those eclipses at the end of last year, you'll see it's learn to meditate or jump out of a window or something. It's like, because this world is kind of like, okay, and we act like it's something new. It's actually not new. It's always been this way. This is why every spiritual tradition has all these stories about how the world is going to end and all this. It's nothing new. But now it's very intense. And so again, it's forcing people to like become spiritual. Because we realize that the outer world is very unreliable. It always has been. So any other thoughts on that?
I just want to say with what you just said, that it's forcing people to become spiritual. One of the things I've really been noticing is how it's also forcing spiritual people to become more real, like to accept the reality. Sometimes in spiritual communities, we have a tendency to sort of eschew the regular world and think that we can live in this sort of insulated reality and just be doing our practice and live with our people and not have to worry. But more and more, I think the world is incumbing upon that even, and we need to reach out. Like Malini said, we're the elders also, you know, even if we're not that old. If you've been practicing, if you have practiced, if you have things to offer, we need to start stepping into the real world and helping also, because the problems being solved and staying in that really secular and materialistic world is where we're at now.
Anybody else? Yeah, I'll just echo what you're saying, and also that it's a good distinction. I don't usually make it because I don't really think people are spiritual. People who say so-called spirit, to me it's so-called. All of it is so-called, because you're not spiritual unless you're doing it, and most people aren't doing it. Right. They believe things that they don't practice, that they feel good. It's some emotional experience that I'm spiritual because I read this or something. And again, I'm not trying to be cynical, but right. I agree with what you're saying. But yeah, I almost don't even make the distinction, because it's almost like people aren't spiritual.
Yeah, the Rahu end of the node is really telling us that, you know, have a normal relationship with food, sex, money, anything you consume in order to be spiritual. You can't be spiritual with having a dysfunctional relationship with all the resources in life and your relationship with especially food, sex, and money. I always say that. So yeah, true spirituality lies in being normal in a materialistic world. Otherwise, that will just pull you down.
Yeah, all great gurus, because we always have this dream that one day I'll go to the Himalayas and one day I'll do all this. And all great gurus say, you know, stop all that. If you go to the Himalayas now, you'll take the world with you. The world is in you. You'll be on the Himalayas thinking about Facebook. If that's what you're doing, that's what you're doing. You take it with you. You know, so you have to be enmeshed in the action. That's what karma is. Karma is action. And you see these great beings, these great gurus and teachers, they don't lose themselves in the actions of the world because they're authentically embodying it. So again, this is the challenge and the opportunity of our time now, in these times of just what, you know, outer chaos and turmoil. The promise is to embody and to get real, and it's get real or sort of, you know, perish, or just be utterly triggered. And again, this is the thing that you see. The people that are the most triggered are the spiritual people. No question. People that are just living their life and this and that, they're like, oh, okay, whatever. But the spiritual people are the ones that are, quote, spiritual, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, hey, it was fantastic to hang out with all of you. And this was a fantastic talk. I'm happy to have shared this space. You all did a great job, and I'll have all the links below. So everybody should, you know, visit Malini, Alix, and Alexis's YouTube channels, websites, and whatnot. They all offer readings, updates, reports, and whatnot. So seek them out. As you can tell, they're fantastic astrologers. And so leave some comments and share this. And we thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, all of you. Malini,
Thank you, all of you. Yeah.
Sam.